My name is Phoebe. I'm 65 years old and live in San Francisco. I've been divorced for many years, raised my son on my own, and have long since grown used to a life of solitude. Until that day, when my son vaguely discouraged me from attending my grandson's graduation. I still boarded a plane to Los Angeles, clutching his gift and carrying a quiet hope to surprise him. But I saw what I never expected to see. The real heartbreak doesn't come from arguments or accusations. It comes from the moment you realize they had already arranged their version of family. And somehow, I was no longer part of it. That was a nice afternoon. The sunlight poured in gently. I sat at the small round table in the kitchen, a half cup of still warm tea by my side, along with a stack of congratulatory cards and a sheet of wrapping paper printed with cartoon hats. I was getting ready to wrap a gift for Benedicta Beginner's telescope. He had mentioned during a video call that he'd suddenly developed an interest in astronomy, and even showed me a drawing he made of the moon. I pulled out the little notepad where he had scribbled the time and location of his graduation ceremony during a family dinner last month. I still remembered how he looked at me earnestly that evening and said, "Grandma, you have to come. I want you to see me walk across the stage." My teacher even asked me to give a speech because I'm one of the outstanding graduates. I had smiled and promised him I would be there. But that very day, when I called Anders, the conversation took a different turn. "Mom, you really don't have to make the trip," he said on the other end, his tone polite but unmistakably dismissive. "It's just an elementary school graduation, not college. We've got a lot going on here too." I froze for a second. "But you said," I remember Benedict specifically asked me to come. He was silent for a moment, then let out a soft chuckle. "He's just a kid, Mom. They say things without thinking. Delia and I both feel it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't need to be treated like some major family event." I didn't say anything. There was a bit of background noise on his end, like someone prying open a bottle in the kitchen. He lowered his voice and continued, "Plus, the weather over there's not looking great. No need to wear yourself out." I stared at the telescope on the table, my fingers absently running over the wrapping paper. There was a hollow feeling inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness either. It was more like the kind of emptiness you feel when you realize you were never actually on the guest list for something you thought you were invited to. "So, do you want me to mail the gift to your place? Or should I have it delivered to the school?" I forced my voice to sound light. Just send it to the house." "Thanks, Mom." Right before hanging up, he added hastily, "Really, don't overthink it." I set my phone down on the table and looked across at the photo taped to the fridge. Benedict last fall, dressed as a werewolf for Halloween, fake fur glued to his face, his blue eyes sparkling with laughter. He had told me then that I was the coolest grandma in the world for getting him the best costume. But now, it seemed like even showing up to his graduation was somehow unwelcome. I tried convincing myself maybe Anders was right. Maybe it wasn't a big deal. Maybe I was being too emotional. But sitting there in that empty kitchen, with only the hum of the upstairs fan for company, whatever comfort I tried to summon fizzled out like a flat soda. The next day, I met Jill for afternoon tea. I had met her at the community book club, a woman 2 years younger than me, with a big voice and an even bigger heart, the type who could call right and wrong in 3 seconds flat. I was stirring my coffee when I casually mentioned I was planning to go to my grandson's elementary school graduation, but Anders said it wasn't worth the trouble. She immediately set down her fork, slicing through the calm of our tea time. "What? You're his grandma. If you don't show up for his elementary graduation, what memories will he even have of you later?" I faltered. Anders said it'd be too much trouble. Didn't want me tiring myself out. Trouble, my foot. It's not like you're hiking across the country. You're healthy, retired, and independent. Since when do you need anyone's permission to see your grandson graduate? I smiled weakly. It's not like he forbade me. It's just that he's worried you'll make someone else uncomfortable, isn't it? Jill squinted at me. Hasn't your ex been worming his way back into Anders's life lately? I didn't answer. I just set my cup down a little too carefully and said, softer now, I just don't want to feel like an unwanted guest. She looked at me for a few seconds, then softened her voice. You're not a guest, Phoebe. You're family. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, and unfolded the notepad again. I booked myself a Takeda morning economy flight from San Francisco to Los Angeles. I didn't tell Anders. I didn't tell Delia. I didn't even tell Benedict. I packed one small suitcase, one congratulatory card, and the carefully wrapped telescope, and a heart that hurt quietly but hadn't yet given up. I wasn't going there to make a scene. I wasn't going to ask questions or demand explanations. I wasn't even looking for a seat of honor. I just wanted to give the grandson who had once waited for May a surprise. Even if it meant standing far back in the crowd, catching a single glimpse of him, wearing a paper graduation cap, that would be enough. While rummaging through the closet in the guest room for my suitcase, I accidentally knocked over an old box. It hit the floor with a dull thud. The lid popped open, and a stack of photo albums slid out. As I crouched down, a glimpse of yellowed paper caught my eye, a photo from the day Anders graduated high school, taken at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. His curls had just been trimmed short, and he wore a blue and white graduation gown, his arms slung around my shoulders, grinning like a kid who thought the world belonged to him. I still had warm chestnut hair back then, wore a blue trench coat, and smiled even brighter than he did. That day, he had said to me, "Mom, I know Dad treated you badly all these years. You had to be both mom and dad, working all day and still worrying about me every night. When I start making money, it's going to be my turn to take care of you. You won't have to worry anymore." I brushed the surface of the photo lightly. It felt cool beneath my fingertips. Back then, I had just filed for divorce and moved out. My heart was hollow most days, but thinking of that boy made me fearless. Andy and I officially separated when Anders was 19. But honestly, the cracks had started long before. Andy worked in real estate development. Those were boom years, and he was always on a business trip, gone 3, 5, sometimes 7 days at a time. I had convinced myself he was building a future for us. Then one evening, a call came from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice on the line, blunt and unkind, said, "Your husband has more than one home." I remember I didn't cry. I just closed the phone and went back to making dinner. Anders came home late that night, talking about rehearsing his graduation speech between bites of dinner. Watching him eat, I thought, even if this family is breaking apart, I will hold it together until he's safely off to college. After Andy moved out for good, he all but disappeared from our lives, apart from the occasional check that barely made a dent. He didn't show up for Anders's high school graduation, nor for his college send-off. I handled everything: the paperwork, the tuition, the moving day. I still remember hauling his suitcases up the dormitory stairs alone, the rain soaking through my coat, telling myself, "It's okay. It'll get better." Sometimes, I think that's just who I am, no matter how bad the hand. I always believe I can play it to win. When Anders landed his first internship in Los Angeles, I covered his first 3 months' rent and helped furnish the apartment. Later, he got married, had a son. Delia wasn't overly warm, but she would send Thanksgiving cards each year. Sometimes even a picture of Benedict, "This is his rocket drawing," or "First trip to the museum," asked a million questions. I never felt absent from this family. Even if we didn't live in the same city. Even if we didn't see each other often. Even if Benedict sometimes called me Grandma Phoebe, now instead of just Grandma. So what? He was still my grandson. I still remembered him, tiny and laughing, sprinting across my backyard, slipping on a sprinkler head, falling hard on his bottom, then running to cling to my leg in tears. I remembered too much, and maybe that was the problem. I remembered everything. They remembered less and less. I slid the albums back into the box, tucked the telescope carefully into the bottom of my suitcase, and packed an extra clean white shirt. I'm not the type to make a scene, but in that moment, I wanted to look my best even if I was just sitting in the last row of the audience. I wanted to look like someone who belonged there. The wind picked up outside, making the little chimes on the porch tinkle. I stood in the doorway for a while, watching the sky darken, a sudden unease prickling in my chest. It wasn't about the ceremony. It was about Anders. I had never thought he would lie to me, even if it was for my own good, even if it was to keep things simple. He should not have pushed me away like this. You know, sometimes a door doesn't slam shut with a bang. Sometimes it just quietly, silently locks behind you, and only then do you realize you've been standing outside all along. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the half-packed suitcase. Maybe Jill was right. I'm his mother, not some expendable neighbor. I was going, not to prove anything, but to show my grandson that I was there. Even if all I got was a smile, a hug, or a surprised, "You still made it. It would be worth it." My heart was pounding in my throat as the plane touched down. The sky over Los Angeles was a dull gray, the June clouds hanging low like a messy, unmade bed, thick and wrinkled. It wasn't cold, but the air was heavy with dampness. I stood outside the taxi stand, clutching my suitcase. A breeze caught the collar of my thin trench coat, making it flutter slightly, almost as if whispering, "Where you're going, you might not be welcome." The cab driver was a woman in her 50s, wearing oversized sunglasses. Along the way, she chatted about her new grandson, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "You said you're here for your grandson's graduation, right?" I nodded. "Yes, just a little surprise visit." She grinned. "Good move. These days, being there in person means more than 100 cards ever could." I smiled back, but the smile never reached my eyes. When we arrived at the school, the ceremony hadn't started yet. A small crowd had already gathered by the entrance, parents, relatives, siblings holding balloons and flowers, and clusters of kids in matching t-shirts printed with Class of 2024. I stayed back, lingering behind a small grove of trees by the sidewalk, my fingers tightening around my bag strap. I must have looked like a reporter on a secret assignment, pretending to scroll through my phone while stealing glances at the archway across the field, where a hand-painted sign read, "Congratulations, graduates." From a distance, the static buzz of microphones being tested mingled with the laughter and shouting of children. That old, familiar warmth stirred in my chest. Just one glimpse of Benedict would make all the exhaustion from the flight worthwhile. I drifted along the outer edge of the crowd, avoiding getting too close. I didn't want to run into Anders or Delia, not yet. Honestly, I didn't even know exactly what I was afraid of. Maybe it was just the fear of seeing that look on their faces. The one that said, "You really showed up." Minutes ticked by. Finally, the announcer picked up the microphone, and the crowd quieted down. I stood on my toes, scanning the crowd, and then I saw him. Benedict. He was wearing a white shirt and navy slacks, his collar a little crooked, his hair tousled like he'd slept too long, and rushed out the door. Delia stood next to him, fussing gently with his sleeves. He looked taller than he had during our last video call. His blue eyes were still there, but they carried a new weight, a hint of steadiness that hadn't been there before. And Anders stood nearby, jacket unbuttoned, eyes focused intently on his son. I was about to step forward when I saw them. Andy. He stood right next to Anders, dressed in a gray suit, his hair fully grayed but his face surprisingly lively. Beside him was a woman in a light beige dress, her curls perfectly set, makeup flawless, her bright skirt flowing elegantly. Maria's new wife. They were laughing and chatting with Anders, positioning themselves for a photo. Delia nudged Benedict gently into the center. Andy placed his hand naturally on Benedict's shoulder, and Mary smiled sweetly, every inch the picture-perfect step-grandmother. Through the buzz of the crowd, I heard Anders's voice, cheerful and light. "Okay, everybody look over here. Family photo." I froze where I stood, as if my feet had been nailed to the ground. Family photo. The words pierced through my ears and straight into my chest. The voice wasn't loud, but inside my mind it echoed, over and over again, like a thunderclap. I wasn't hoping to be at the center of it all. I just thought maybe, even standing on the outskirts, I could still be part of that memory. But in that frame, that family photo, there had never been a space for me. Without thinking, I lowered my head and took a step back, bumping into a tree branch behind me with a soft crack. I hurried away, my heart pounding, my steps light and shaky, as if the ground beneath me had turned to mist. I glanced back once. They were smiling at the camera, Benedict managing a cooperative grin. Andy said something that made Mary laugh and playfully swat at his arm. Their laughter carried easily across the field. That was when I understood why Anders hadn't wanted me to come. It wasn't because of the distance. It wasn't because the ceremony was too small. It was because they had already formed a new family, one I wasn't part of anymore. In that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't march up and demand an explanation. I simply picked up my bag, lowered my head, and walked away along the edge of the crowd. No one noticed I had been there. Just like no one remembered the promise I had made with Benedict to be here. I don't even remember how I made it out of that school. It wasn't until my feet hit the sidewalk that I realized my throat was parched and tight, like something was lodged there, making it nearly impossible to swallow. I forced myself not to look back, but my eyes, traitorous as they were, caught glimpses anyway off the archway. The balloons, the laughing faces, and that family. No, I shouldn't call it that family. I used to be part of that family, somewhere along the line, though it felt like my name had been quietly erased. I flagged down a taxi. The driver was a young man in a baseball cap, blasting some heavy-beat hip-hop from the speakers. He glanced at me and asked, "Where to, ma'am?" I gave him the name of a small motel I had found on the map. My voice was so hoarse I barely recognized it. As the car pulled away from the curb, I leaned back against the seat, clutching my bag to my chest. The telescope was still inside, pressing against my knee, a small, hard weight, a reminder of everything I had just seen. I thought I could hold back the tears. I really tried, but tears aren't reasonable. They don't ask for permission. They don't care if you're in the middle of a stranger's cab. They just break through your defenses, sliding down your face before you can even catch them. I turned toward the window, pressing the back of my hand to the corner of my eye. The driver didn't say a word. He simply turned the music down, switching the station to something silent. The city blurred past outside, but all I could see were flashes of the past. I remembered the night Anders had his first fever, how I sat by his bed all night, swapping cool cloths, terrified the fever would cause permanent damage. And Andy, off somewhere on a business trip, probably getting drunk in some bar, too busy to even call. I remembered saving for 3 months straight to buy Anders the latest laptop for college. He had hugged me, laughing, "Mom, this is way too much. I'm just a freshman. I don't need something this fancy." I remembered the Christmas card he gave me that year, the one that said, "I'll never forget, it's because of you that I'm here." And now I found myself wondering if, in his eyes, I'd become nothing more than the pathetic woman who mailed gifts and whispered, "I love you," over the phony and awkward relic from another life. Someone he could pat on the head and sideline while he embraced his new family. When the cab pulled up in front of the motel, the tears had already dried on my cheeks. The driver didn't rush me. He waited quietly until I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and opened the door. The motel was one of those basic roadside inns 2 stories high, with rows of doors lined by fake flower baskets. I swiped my card at the door, dropped my suitcase on the floor, and sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching the strap of my bag. Slowly, I unzipped it and pulled out the telescope. It had started as Benedict's little dream, wanted to look at the stars, and I had just wanted to make one tiny wish come true. But now, it was a gift with nowhere to go. I didn't even open the box. I just placed it on the bed beside me and stared at it. I wasn't trying to intrude. I wasn't trying to steal anyone's place. All I had wanted was to show up at this small milestone in his life and say, "Grandma's here. Grandma's always here." But somehow, that simple wish had been twisted into something unnecessary in Anders's mind, something unwelcome, something unfit to even be included in a photograph. I sat there for a long time, watching the daylight fade. The orange glow of the street lamps started to seep in through the crack in the curtains. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't eat dinner. My phone buzzed. One seat was a credit card alert, but I didn't even bother to check it. Maybe it was the silence that brought all the old memories bubbling up. The year I got divorced, I stayed in a motel just like this. Andy had sat me down and said he needed space, and I had packed my things and moved out, landing in some rundown inn on the edge of town. I had spent that night lying alone in bed, flipping through our wedding album, asking myself, where did I go wrong? Tonight felt almost exactly the same, except this time, the question had changed. I wasn't asking what I had done wrong anymore. I was asking, how could they do it? How could they slowly, quietly push someone who never once walked away into being just an outsider? I barely slept that night. My mind ran like an old film reel, flashing Cynism and Anders at the beach when he was little, building sandcastles, Delia bringing Benedict over for the first time, the little boy chasing squirrels in my backyard. They couldn't have forgotten all that, but maybe they just didn't care anymore. Early the next morning, I arranged to meet Anders. I picked a cafe near their neighborhood, one he used to frequent. Every time I visited Los Angeles, we would usually catch up there. The barista still recognized me and greeted me with a warm smile. Long time no see, Mrs. Palmer. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar. The sky was overcast, the kind of low, heavy gray that mirrored the rush of traffic across the street. In the glass window, I caught my reflection, me eyes clearer, steadier than I would have expected. 10 minutes later, Anders walked in, striding toward me. He wore a gray wool jacket, his hair slightly disheveled, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "Mom, you actually came," he said before even sitting down, his voice tight with a note of defense, maybe even blame. I set down my cup and met his gaze. "You told me not to come," I said evenly. "I didn't really understand what you meant by that, so I thought I'd come and ask you face-to-face." He shifted awkwardly into the chair, tugging at his sleeve. "I just didn't want you to wear yourself out. Flying in from San Francisco, it was really a small ceremony. It was over before you know it." "I wasn't flying in for the ceremony," I said softly, but firmly enough that every word landed. "I was flying in for Benedict. He wanted me there, and I promised I would be." He dropped his gaze to the table, exhaling a shallow sigh. "I just wanted to keep the family stuff simple." "Simple?" I leaned back, my voice calm but cutting. "Your idea of simple is putting your father front and center, letting Mary stand where I used to stand, and telling me not to bother coming." He didn't answer right away. He stirred his coffee, staring into the swirling liquid like it held some kind of escape. I kept going. "You could have been honest with me. If you felt I didn't fit into the new family portrait, if it would have been inconvenient or embarrassing to have me there, you could have said so. I can handle the truth. But don't hide behind, 'I was worried about you,' to cover your own shame." His brows drew together. Finally, he looked up, his voice low, his patience thinning. "Mom, you always take everything so personally. I never said you didn't belong. You get too emotional about everything." "Then tell me," I said, my tone steady, "what would have been the reasonable arrangement? That I sit in a taxi, crying until I could paste a smile back on? That I coach myself into thinking you didn't mean it? That would have been fair to me?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to just above a whisper. "Tell me something honestly, Anders. Yesterday, when you were shouting 'Look over here, smile,' for that family photo, did it ever cross your mind that your mother was standing just across the street, holding a gift, watching from the outside?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face, but then he stiffened, his voice edging toward irritation. "Mom, you're being so dramatic. It's not that I don't care about you. I just think you let emotions control everything." I held his gaze. "I used to believe," I said quietly, "that you, of all people, understood how much I've given you." He didn't soften. Instead, he let out a short, almost bitter laugh. "Mom, you gave me a lot, sure, but in the end all you really ever gave was emotion. Love isn't the same thing as capability. It's not the same as a future." I froze, stunned for a breath. Anders continued, his voice chillingly steady. "Dad's been in real estate for decades. I'm in the same industry now. Having a relationship with him opens doors, connections, funding. Yes, I know he wasn't much of a father before. Yes, he treated you badly, but that's the past. People move forward. You're retired. You should live your own life now. Stop using love as some kind of leverage to interfere with my choices." I didn't lash out. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stood up slowly, lifting my bag from the floor. "You're right," I said, nodding once. My face was calm, my voice almost serene. "I am retired, and yes, emotion is all I have left." I paused, meeting his eyes squarely. "And starting today, I will reserve my emotions only for people who know how to cherish them." Before he could react, I smiled faintly and added, "You might want to check that property transfer agreement I sent you. It may not be quite what you think anymore." Then I turned and walked out without looking back. But I knew without a doubt that behind me, the certainty on his face was already beginning to crack. After leaving the cafe, I didn't go straight back to the motel. The street wind was sharp against my face. The sky weighed heavy and low, just like my mood. It wasn't anger. It wasn't humiliation. It was something colder, cleaner. That quiet clarity when you finally realize, this is where the line ends. and it's okay more than okay to walk forward alone. Standing at the corner, I pulled out my phone and tapped into my favorites list, the law firm I had consulted a few years ago when I was setting up my retirement plans. Back then, I had been thinking about how to secure Anders's future, how to leave him something stable. I still had hope then. I still trusted him. Now he believed his cold, absentee father was the one who could open doors and promise him a future. I had never finalized the asset transfers. The house originally meant to be his this summer was halfway through the paperwork. I had even hired Delia's favorite designer to walk through the kitchen, planning renovations so Benedict could have a backyard to set up his beloved telescope. But today, I wasn't interested in paving anyone else's road anymore. The cab pulled up in front of a small 3-story building, glass panels reflecting the gray street and, faintly, my own steady, resolute reflection. Inside, the reception area was bright and modern. The receptionist smiled warmly as she poured me a coffee. "Ms. Palmer, good to see you again. Last time was earlier this year. Right, you were finalizing your property planning." I nodded. "Yes, I have some changes to make. Please set up a meeting with one of the attorneys." Within 10 minutes, I was seated across from Bill, a middle-aged lawyer with steady hands and a kind but professional demeanor. He flipped through my file, his expression neutral but not cold. "Ms. Palmer," he said, looking up, "what can we help you with today?" "I've decided to revoke a planned property transfer," I said clearly. "The 2-bedroom home in Mill Valley. I had intended to gift it to my son this summer, but I've changed my mind. I want to put it on the market and move the funds back into my personal accounts." Bill nodded, typing briskly on his laptop. "As of today, the title remains under your sole ownership. Since the transfer was not completed, there are no legal barriers to revoking it. However, to protect against any potential claims of verbal promise, you'll need to sign a formal declaration. I'll also arrange for our real estate advisor and contracts attorney to coordinate the sale." I nodded, listening carefully. "I understand you might think I'm acting out of emotion," I said quietly, "but I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm certain I won't regret it." Bill smiled faintly. "Actually," he said, "it's rarely the angry parents who come in to change plans. More often, it's the people who've finally realized what they truly want." He paused, pen in hand. "For documentation purposes, I'll need to draft a brief statement of intent. Would you like me to suggest wording?" I smiled back. "Write this. Giving to the wrong people is worse than burning it away." Bill chuckled under his breath, giving me a respectful nod. I signed the preliminary revocation forms and the listing authorization. My hand didn't tremble once. Maybe once I had been afraid of breaking ties. Today, I realized what was truly terrifying: giving your loyalty to those who never deserved it. When the papers were done, I stood outside, watching the steady flow of strangers pass by. For over 30 years, I had automatically plotted a future for my son, saving for him, making room for his family, building a safety net for his child. Now I understood. Some people don't mistreat you because they don't understand your worth. They mistreat you because they believe you'll never leave. That afternoon, I walked for a long time, from the financial district all the way to the bay, letting the salty air whip around me. I found a bench and sat, scrolling through my phone. I stumbled across an old draft and email I had once meant to send Anders when Benedict started middle school. Attached was the preliminary deed transfer. The first line of that email said, "This is the beginning of a new chapter for you and your family." Without hesitation, I hit delete. "I am not an extension of your life anymore. I have a life of my own, and you are no longer part of it." That evening, back at the motel, I called a real estate agent in San Francisco and initiated the listing process. It was a prime Propertia 2-story home with a garden, tucked in one of the city's most coveted suburban pockets. The agent's voice lit up immediately. "With this location, you'll have offers within 3 days." I simply said, "Let it leave my life as quickly as possible." For dinner, I ordered a simple pasta dish and a small bottle of red wine. As dusk fell outside the window, I sat back against the couch, eating slowly, sipping the wine, and letting the stillness wrap around me. One thought kept rising and falling with each breath. Freedom begins the moment you realize you no longer need anyone's approval. The evening after I returned to San Francisco, I was sitting out on the balcony sipping tea when my phone buzzed. A message from Delia. Hi Phoebe, would you be free to take a call tonight? I'd like to talk. I stared at the text for a second before replying. Of course, I'm free now. Less than a minute later, the phone rang. Her voice was a little tentative at first. Phoebe, hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. I said, actually, I was hoping we could talk. There was a short pause. Then she said more firmly, I know you came last week, and I know you didn't come up to us. I stayed silent, waiting. I'm sorry, she said, her voice growing stronger. I thought Anders didn't want you traveling because of the distance. Your health, that's what he told me. But that day at the ceremony, I saw you. I gripped my teacup a little tighter. You saw me. Across the field, she confirmed. You were standing behind the trees. I couldn't get away in time to come to you. But later that night, I regretted it. I shouldn't have gone along with his arrangements. I shouldn't have accepted that it's just a small ceremony excuse. I let a few seconds pass before replying. You didn't know what they had planned. You don't need to apologize. I still want to, she said, voice softening. Because I also saw how Benedict kept glancing around that day. And I saw his face when Andy and Mary stepped in for photos. That place shouldn't have been taken by anyone else. He kept looking around for you. Phoebe, he even asked why you weren't there. A lump formed in my throat. I pressed it down. He's just a kid. He doesn't understand the lines adults draw. But adults do, she said quietly. Through the phone, I could hear faint clattering from her kitchen, like she was stirring something on the stove, steeling herself to speak. I've been noticing things lately, she continued, slower now. Especially Marish's been saying around the house that you're too emotional, that you're too bored now that you're retired, trying to meddle in young people's lives. I gave a small, dry laugh. Doesn't surprise me. That's exactly Mary's style, and it figures, given the kind of man Andy is and the kind of woman he'd end up marrying. And Andy, Delia hesitated. He's been having these investment project talks with Anders. I didn't think much of it at first, but last week I suggested we use the house as collateral for a loan. I sat bolt upright. Your house? Yes, she said grimly. He said it would be just a guarantee, not an actual loan. And Anders was actually considering it. I tried to talk him out of it, but you know how he gets sometimes, especially now. Trying to maintain some relationship with a father who suddenly wants back in. I closed my eyes, forcing my voice steady. Andy isn't coming back. He's circling back with planned purpose. There's a difference. He hasn't changed, just found a new story to sell. Delia's voice sounded desperate now. Phoebe, can you tell me honestly what happened back then? I know you two divorced, but I never heard the full story. I hesitated, then spoke, slow and clear. He cheated on me, Delia, repeatedly, not once, but over and over again. I forgave him more times than I should have, trying to keep a family intact for Anders. But to Andy, his business trips were always more important than we were. The day we finally signed the divorce papers, he said only one thing. I just don't love you anymore. Then he left with the other woman. On the other end, I heard only the soft bubbling of her pot. And all these years, I continued. He didn't build a life. He burned bridges, lost money, made enemies. He's not reaching out to Anders because he cares. He's reaching because he needs. Another long silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, she said, I believe you. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'm not asking you to pick sides. I'm just asking you to stay alert, especially for Benedict. He's noticed too, she admitted. One night he asked me, did Grandpa make Grandma Phoebe stay away? I didn't even know what to say. I took a deep breath. My voice even calmer than I expected. You don't need to explain anything to him. Just stay by his side, and when it's time to choose, don't wait too long. I will, she promised. And Phoebe are always welcome in our home. No matter what Anders says, I'll handle him. I laughed lightly. Thank you, Delia. Honestly, sometimes it feels like you're the only daughter I ever had. She laughed too, a little embarrassed. Then promise me something, you'll come over for dinner soon. Don't isolate yourself because of what they did. I will, I said, and I'll bring my carrot cake. After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunset stretch its colors across the sky. There was a peace settling into mesomething I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I didn't know exactly what was coming next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer waiting for someone to open the door for me. I had learned how to open my own window. Cracks in a family rarely begin with some grand betrayal. More often, they start with a tiny misstep and imperceptible shift, and from there, everything slowly unravels. That week, I happened to be in Los Angeles for a few days. Originally, it was just to take care of some property paperwork and visit an old friend's art gallery. Before I left San Francisco, I had sent Delia a message. If they were free, maybe we could have dinner together. She replied quickly, apologizing that her work trips were packed that week, but said if I could stay a little longer, she'd try to make time. I didn't press. I simply answered, if you need help with Benedict or anything else, just let me know. Friday afternoon, around 4:30, Delia called, her voice tight with urgency. Phoebe, can you pick up Benedict? Something happened at school. I just got a call from the principal, but I'm stuck at the airport. I wiped my muddy hands on a rag and immediately said, of course, what happened? Apparently he got into a conflict with another kid. They thought he might have taken something, but I know him. He wouldn't. It's probably just a misunderstanding. Theory, all new to middle school, still figuring each other out. I understand. I'm leaving now. Send me the address. 40 minutes later, I arrived at the school. After buzzing through the front office, a staff member led me to the administrative office. There, slumped in a chair, was Benedict, face tense, gripping his school ID lanyard, his eyes wide and full of panic. The moment he saw me, he visibly relaxed. Grandma. I walked over and knelt down in front of him. I'm here. It's okay. A middle-aged male teacher came over, wearing the kind of professional, placating smile you see after a conflict. We haven't made any conclusions, he said carefully. We're simply trying to understand the situation. Another student's pencil case went missing, and it was found near Benedict's backpack. I kept my voice calm but firm. Did you search his bag? We followed procedure, the teacher said. No search, just a conversation with both parties. We're explaining, encouraging accountability, not accusing. I turned to Benedict and gently asked, did you take anything that wasn't yours? He shook his head immediately, voice shaking. No. I didn't even see the pencil case. I nodded and turned back to the teacher. I'm taking him home now. His mother's already on her way back. If you need anything further, you can contact us. The teacher nodded, walking us to the door with professional politeness. In the car, Benedict sat stiff in the back seat, chewing on his lip until it turned pale. I kept my voice even as I drove. You didn't do anything wrong. You're not responsible for other people's assumptions. He whispered. Grandpa says, if people keep misunderstanding you, it means there's something wrong with you. I froze, clenching the steering wheel. You mean Grandpa Andy? I asked carefully. He nodded. He said, if a teacher thinks you're wrong, you should probably go fix yourself. I tightened my grip on the wheel. And what do you think, Benedict? Do you believe you did anything wrong? He shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. I didn't. I hate that they don't believe me. I let a few seconds pass, slowing the car, and said softly, Benedict, listen to me. Emotions are not a bad thing. It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay for your mom to feel hurt too. The people who love you, really love you, won't be scared of your emotions. They'll stand with you through them. He looked up at me then, something shifting behind those blue eyes, a tiny thread of trust knitting itself back together. When we got to the house, Delia was just pulling into the driveway. The moment she saw us, she rushed over, relief pouring off her. Thank you, Phoebe. I gave a brief nod and said quietly, we need to talk. He's hearing a lot of things he shouldn't be hearing. Her face tightened immediately. She ushered Benedict inside, handed him a cup of hot cocoa, and turned back to me. Anders is working late tonight, she said under her breath. But honestly, I'm reaching my breaking point. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked her straight in the eye. You need to really show him who he's trusting, and what it's costing you. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed me a string of recent transactions. Small transfers to Andy. The latest one, $3,000 labeled as consulting services. That money's not coming back, she said, her voice sharp and cold. I lifted my gaze to her. Have you warned Anders? I have, she said. But he doesn't listen. He keeps saying, even if it fails, at least I gave my father a chance. I let out a hollow laugh. He's not giving his father a chance. He's trying to buy a version of the father he never had. She nodded slowly, her tone flat but resolute. Well, it's time for that dream to end. I glanced over at Benedict, curled up on the sofa with his cocoa, eyes flicking anxiously at the TV, but not really watching it. I took a deep breath. I'm not here to demand you pick sides. I'm here to help you see clearly who deserves your trust and who you need to protect. Delia met my eyes without flinching. I understand, she said, and I just hope Anders figures it out before it's too late. The next evening, Delia sent me a short message. I think he's finally starting to doubt. The following morning, just as I finished watering the flowers in the backyard, my phone rang. Anders. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. I hesitated, but answered. Mom, he said, his voice hoarse, as if he hadn't slept all night. I'm here, I replied evenly. He paused for a few beats, then said, do you have time? I'd like to meet with you. I thought for a moment. Come to the cafe near my motel, 10 o'clock. He didn't argue, didn't explain, just said, okay. When we met, he looked even worse than he had days earlier, unshaven, hollow-eyed, worn down. But there was something else in him too, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Doubt. Delia told me what you did for Benedict, he said quietly, sinking into the seat across from me. Thank you. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at him steadily. You didn't come just to say thank you, did you? He shook his head and pulled a stack of papers from his jacket pocket. These are the records of the money I transferred to Dad over the past few months, and the project proposals he sent me. He hesitated, then gave a bitter half-smile. I took all of it to a friend at the bank yesterday, had them run some checks. He paused, the corner of his mouth tightening. Turns out those projects don't exist. His consulting company, shut down 2 years ago. The so-called overseas investment platform, an empty shell. I stayed silent. I confronted him. Anders said, voice low, almost a whisper. At first, he kept lying, said it was just paperwork maneuvering. But when I pressed him, when I didn't let up, he finally snappy said, you're my son, aren't you? If you won't help your own father when he's in trouble, then why the hell did I bother having you? Anders lifted his eyes to meet mine, and they were bloodshot. I asked softly, and what did you say? He swallowed hard. I told him I did try to help. I wanted him to be part of my family again. But real family isn't about taking advantage. It's about standing by each other. And what he wanted wasn't family. It was a free ATM. The words seemed to deflate him. He sagged back against the chair, exhausted. I nodded, calm and steady, and pulled a folder from my bag, sliding it across the table. He frowned, confused. What's this? 3 years' worth of your father's civil debt records. I said. His credit reports. The collection notices from 2 different banks. He stared at the folder like it might burn his fingers. How did you get this? He whispered. I knew who he was. Anders. I said. I always knew. You just refused to listen. He dropped his gaze to the papers, his hand trembling slightly as he flipped through them. You always thought I was meddling, emotional, outdated. I continued, my voice level. But let me tell you something, Anders. In my life, I've handled more disasters, stepped on more landmines, and seen more betrayals than you've read in your precious financial reports. He looked up at me, eyes wide with a raw kind of fear. His mouth opened hesitantly. The house, he started, hope flickering there, desperate. You were planning to give me that house, weren't you? I didn't flinch. I was. He gripped the edge of the chair so hard his knuckles turned white. But then I thought it through. I said, I realized I don't want to spend the rest of my life maintaining a relationship that doesn't even offer basic respect. Mom, he said, his voice cracking. I'm not ungrateful. I believed him. He said he regretted missing my childhood. He said he wanted to make up for it. I met his pleading eyes without wavering. Maybe he does regret it, I said softly. But not because he missed your life. Because he missed your wallet. Anders dropped his face into his hands, letting out a long, ragged breath. I didn't reach across the table. I didn't comfort him. Maybe for the first time in his life, he needed to sit with what he had lost or feel it. When he finally lifted his head again, His voice was raw and brittle. You don't trust me anymore, do you? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said quietly, trust isn't something you just declare. It's built, action by action, day by day. And when you tear it down, you don't get to expect it to be waiting for you like before. He clenched his jaw. I understand. I rose from my seat and picked up my bag. I won't be planning your future anymore, Anders, I said. You're grown now. It's time you live with the futures you choose. I didn't offer him a hug. I didn't soften the blow. And as I walked out of the cafe, I didn't look back. But I knew he was sitting there at that little table, staring at the pieces of the fantasy he had shattered with his own hands, watching them fall, one by one, into the cold, sharp light of reality. On the other side, not long after, word got around that Andy's debts finally overwhelmed him. His properties were foreclosed, his accounts frozen, and whatever dignity he clung to collapsed almost overnight. Mary, realizing there was no future left to salvage, quietly filed for divorce and left, taking with her whatever could still be moved. The carefully spun illusion they had built together washed away like a sandcastle under a rising tide swift. Complete and final. A few days later, I returned to San Francisco. The moment I landed, I didn't head straight home. Instead, I went to the Costa Familiar path where the trail opened wide and the Golden Gate Bridge carved a burnt orange arc across the misty distance. I sat on a bench, sipping coffee, scrolling through old photos on my phone, pictures of Anders and me, a newborn Benedict cradled in my arms, a few snapshots of the three of us together at the San Francisco Botanical Garden. Once, these photos filled me with pride and hope. They still held their value now, but not as proof that I was needed. They were simply pieces of my life, no more, no less. I wasn't anyone's shadow anymore. I wasn't anyone's sacrifice. I was simply myself. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I told her that the house we had listed had reached my target offer. I authorized her to accept the highest bid and to transfer the proceeds directly into my personal account earmarked for my retirement and a few community projects I had started to plan. After walking me through the confirmation process, my lawyer politely asked, "Would you still like to keep the original beneficiary assignment active?" "Cancel it," I said crisply. "The ownership belongs to me now, and it will stay with me until I decide who truly deserves it." She laughed gently. "You know, Ms. Palmer, you're one of our most decisive clients." I chuckled softly. When a woman stops waiting for someone else to define her worth, clarity comes naturally. That evening, a new email popped into my inbox. It was from Delia. Subject: "We'd love to have you over for dinner." The message was simple. "Benedict has something he wants to say to you. I hope you'll come. This time, don't stay at a motel. Families should stay together." I smiled, a slow, grateful smile that settled deep inside me. That weekend, I packed a fresh white blouse, a homemade carrot cake, and a small bottle of red wine. Then I drove 6 hours down to Los Angeles, not as a tag-along to someone else's family, not as a forgotten figure lurking in the background, but as myself, independent, clear-eyed, and still willing to give warmth where it was welcome. When the door swung open, Benedict came running out. "Grandma," he cried, throwing himself into my arms with surprising strength. "Hey there, little guy," I said, hugging him tight. "You've gotten taller. I made you a picture," he said, practically dragging me inside by the hand. "It's all 4 of us." I took the drawing from Hema crayon sketch of himself, Delia, Anders, and me standing under a big tree. Above us, in a childish scrawl, was the word home. In the center, he had drawn a smiling dog. I pointed at it and teased, "And who's this little guy?" He beamed proudly. "That's the dog you said you wanted. I put him in the picture already, so you don't forget." I laughed, my throat tightening with a warmth that didn't spill over into tears. I tucked the picture carefully into my bag. "When I do get a dog, I'll name him Sunday," I said, "because he looks like the kind of friend you spend a whole sunny day with." Delia came over then, her voice low and sincere. "Thank you for coming. I know, a lot's happened." I looked at her for a moment and nodded. But sometimes, the messier things get, the clearer you see who's really standing with you. We held each other's gaze for a second. Then both smiled. During dinner, Anders helped carry plates from the kitchen. He didn't say much. Every so often, he'd glance my way, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure where to begin. I didn't push him. I didn't offer him an easy way back. Relationships aren't repaired with a single dinner or a rushed apology. Later, after the meal, I spotted him standing alone in the backyard, his phone tucked away in his pocket, staring up at the night sky, lost in thought. Delia came over, speaking quietly. He's starting to reevaluate a lot of things. I'm giving him time. I nodded. I gave him so many chances before. I said softly, this time, I'm choosing to give the next chancito myself. 2 weeks later, I pinned a handwritten poster on the bulletin board at the Community Cultural Center, Phoebe's room. Wealth planning and life rebuilding for retired women. Wednesdays, 24 p.m. You don't have to live for anyone else. You can win it back for yourself. The first session, only 5 people showed up. By the second, there were 11. After a month, the chairs couldn't hold us anymore. We had to move into a larger meeting room. Every week, I shared my experience show to handle property sales, manage trusts, and, most importantly, how to redefine your worth without waiting for someone else's approval. After one session, a woman came up to me and said, "You're the clearest-eyed woman I've ever listened to." I laughed and replied, "Clarity isn't a gift. It's something life beats into you." One afternoon after a lecture, I found a letter waiting for me. It was from Benedict. He had used that old drawing, the one with all of us under the big tree, as the cover. Inside, in a child's careful but determined handwriting, it read, "Grandma, you're the coolest woman I know. When I grow up, I want to protect people, not wait around for someone to protect me." I sat on my balcony, sunlight pooling warm across my lap, the letter resting lightly in my hands, the breeze whispering through the railings. And in that moment, I understood. Rebuilding a life doesn't come from a grand, sweeping beginning. It comes quietly. From the moment you decide, you're no longer an extension of someone else. You're your own foundation. That morning, sunlight streamed through the white curtains and spilled across the kitchen tiles. I had just brewed a cup of tea and sat down, book unopened on the table, when my phone rang. It was Benedict. "Grandma," he said, his voice unusually serious, "will you come to my school's next open house?" I laughed. "Didn't we just see each other last month?" "But this time," he said, pausing a little, "the teacher said we could invite someone we want to give special thanks to." He lowered his voice, almost shy. "I picked you." I froze for a second, the words hitting deeper than he could possibly know. Instead of answering right away, I asked gently, "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," he said quickly, as if worried I might second-guess myself. "You've always been there for me. I want everyone to know that." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Something soft and full bloomed in my chest, stitched together with all the time and care I thought had gone unnoticed. "Then I'll make sure to dress like a proper special guest," I teased. He giggled through the phone. "I can make you a badge, like a real one, for your jacket." We agreed on the date and time, and just before hanging up, he added, "Don't leave too fast after it's a surprise." I stared at the dark screen after he hung up, smiling quietly. I thought about years ago, sitting in the bleachers at Anders's college graduation, watching that boy in his blue gown cross the stage. Back then, I had believed that completion was standing in the crowd, witnessing your child's success. Now I understood. Completion isn't about being invited to witness someone else's achievements. It's about the moment they choose to write you into their story because they want you there. On Family Day, I wore a navy wool coat, and, pinned proudly to the chest, was Benedict's handmade badge, a slightly crooked smiling face with the words, "Grandma's home," scribbled beside it. Delia met me outside the school, giving me a warm hug. "Thank you for coming." I smiled and whispered, "This time, I'm the honored guest." I had to. Anders was there too. He nodded at me, a greeting that was both reserved and genuine. There were still words left unsaid between us, but I wasn't in a rush. Real relationships aren't rebuilt in a single conversation. They're repaired through countless small choices: trust, respect, and the willingness to try again. After the ceremony, Benedict dragged me over to the lawn and handed me a small rolled-up booklet. "I started making this after you visited last time. I wanted to finish it in time for open house. This is my first family magazine, he said, beaming. The first issue is for you. I unrolled it. The cover was hand-drawn. A woman standing on a mountaintop under a sky full of stars. A smiling dog, our imagined Sunday at her side. The title, written carefully in pencil, read, The Real Family Hero. I knelt down and hugged him tight. Thank you, I whispered. Grandma's always been proud to have you as my grandson. He blinked up at me, his voice soft but steady. I'm going to keep making you proud. On the drive back to San Francisco, I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through emails or mentally plan the next round of trust paperwork. I just leaned my head against the window, watching the sun thread fine strands of gold through the clouds, stitching back together all the broken pieces this year had torn apart. Somewhere along the way, I thought of that family photo, the one I had once been excluded from. And for the first time, I didn't hate it. That photo wasn't proof of my absence. It was proof of the very first step I took to stop being someone else's afterthought. There will always be photos you're not in. That doesn't mean you aren't important. It means you're finally writing a different story, your own. And for the first time in my life, I understood. I'm not waiting for anyone to invite me into their life anymore. Because my life has never needed anyone's permission to be mine.